When it comes to getting that first job and that next job, Gen Z is navigating uncharted territory. My guest today, Brianne Rush, says that there are unspoken workplace penalties at play, and she herself learned how to navigate those throughout her successful career. She's coming on to tell us what the unspoken playbook is and what we need to navigate to set Gen Z up for success to launch their careers. Join me in welcoming Brianne Rush. Brianne, welcome to the show.
Lisa, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you because I love conversations with people who are like, we're not doing the exact same work, but we're sort of in that shared adjacent space around careers. And I think those are the richest conversations. I know
Absolutely.
you're working with very specific set of people. So, and some of them are our listeners, and many of them are not. But there are things that you're doing with your specific niche that you serve that is going to serve every single listener on here, whether it's the parent of a teen or young adult, whether it's the teen or young adult themselves, male or female, and or somebody who's working with them. So your niche is females in their 20s, Gen Z females in their 20s who have just left or recently left college and they're navigating into career. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's transitioning from college to career with confidence is kind of the little tagline, and that's specifically who we're trying to just give a little bit of guidance and insight as they make such a huge transition in their life.
What I love about that is you're out there at that kind of later stage of the group that I
Mhm.
serve. So I know that you're going to have lessons for even somebody who is 15, 16 years old that because I'm sure you have it all the time. Want somebody you're working with, you're like, I wish they would have been doing this earlier. Like, what would be the one thing, I guess, that would even fit into that category? Like, what's something that when you meet a client and you're like, oh, if they only would have at 16, 17, 18, what would it be? What would be your magical wish?
Yeah, when you're at that age, you're trying to fill your resume, right? So you're trying to get all these hard skills. You are working your best to make sure that you've got all of the activities outside the classroom, plus all the great grades. And that kind of boils down to what we call hard skills. So are you good at piano or fencing or basketball or whatever it may be? But what everybody can actually learn, and to your point, I wish they would start learning a little bit earlier are those soft skills. And the right word or phrase for that is emotional intelligence. So are you good at reading people, their emotions? Are you good at reading your own emotions? And how do you communicate with people? So the great thing is that you can learn this and your audience can actually start learning it as early as, their childhood or their high school age, and that is going to set them up for so much more success than if you just start hearing about this once you're already in the workforce.
I love that it's never too late, but you're going to be ahead of the curve if you start earlier. One thing that you just said, you started with like understanding other people, but then you said in understanding yourself. Like in our three-step framework to get career clarity, step number one is building self-awareness. And so you would put that into that bucket of what's important in what you're doing. Is that right?
It's the same thing here. So the first step is if you are easily stressed when something happens, or easily just your nervousness around, interviewing, for example, in my scenario, that is something that you can actually be aware of and take the steps to correct that, or train yourself in your body and your mind to regulate. And that self-awareness is absolutely step number one for us too.
Now, I saw somewhere on your website that you believe that there are secret workplace rules out there. And I'm going to guess that that surprises these college graduates. What are some of the secret workplace rules?
When you see a job listing, it always says like must be strong communicator. And it's almost like a throwaway line, but that's actually like a really big secret tool that you can use to get your foot in the door if you communicate well during interviews, and then to get promotions. And for me, what I will say is, over my career, I have landed my dream job. I've been promoted 4 times. I've 5x'd my salary. Now in my role, I'm actually interviewing people to bring them in. And when I look back and connect the dots, what I'm seeing is I wasn't the best at any of these things, right? I wasn't the best writer for me. I wasn't the most tech savvy. I wasn't, I was good enough, but I wasn't always the best one. And when I'm interviewing people, it's the same. I'm not actually looking for you to be 100% proficient in your skill set. But what I'm looking for is that really good communication, that curiosity, that self-learning. And those are the secrets. So if you want to get a good interview and get that job offer from that interview, or if you want to get promotions, those are the 3 things that I would say. Communicate, be a self-learner, and stay really curious.
What do you find that most of your clients or most of the people that you're looking at hiring believe will actually get them ahead when it's really something else?
They believe I need to be the best at fill in the blank of their job listing. So I need to be the best at coding, which, you can only get to a certain point with coding. You get the code 100% right, that's it. Or I need to be the best, whatever it may be that you're literally filling out your application for. But that's not the truth. You can actually be 60%, 80% proficient or good enough at that, but filling in the human to human side of things. And that's going to take you so much further. Of course, you need to keep improving your skills as you go, those hard skills. But what's actually going to get you ahead and get you further promotions is it's the soft skills and how you make people feel around you.
So it's really like you've got to do both. I mean, it's a
Yes.
both and, right? I think so many times people make the mistake with a lot of things is thinking like it's binary, either one or the other. And I hear all the time, oh, I'm so busy. I don't know how I'm going to have time for this. But it really, I think, comes down to time management, which is another soft skill, by the way.
Very true. Very true.
So you were saying to me offline that Gen Z is facing these silent workplace penalties. And, I was reading an article in Forbes just this week. So I should say we're recording in the first week of May. This will come out a little bit later. But I was reading about like the graduates. So college graduations and high school graduations are going on all over the place right now, and how they're really facing a tough job market for a lot of different reasons. And so then if you couple like a tough job market with your belief that this generation is facing workplace penalties, it can almost feel like nobody's going to get ahead. How are they facing, like, what are these workplace penalties?
Yeah. So like I mentioned in my day job, I'm interviewing people and hiring people. So I know that these exist. And it's unfortunate for these people who are doing interviews, but the specific ones that come to mind are the Gen Z job hopping. So they don't want to stay in a job for very long. They stay for a year and then they leave to go somewhere else and get a bigger salary. So people don't really want to hire them because they think they're going to have to replace them in a year. This certainly is a bit of a stereotype, but which is again unfortunate. But this idea of Gen Z being entitled, but they're actually inexperienced or not experienced enough to have that entitlement. I'm not saying that's everybody. I'm saying it's a stereotype of the age group. There's the gender pay gap, which I hate still exists, but it's true. Women still make less than men. So for my audience, that's something that's still a huge factor. You have to understand what you should be asking for, even in your first job, because that's going to set you up. And then the last one is AI. So, you might be applying for a job that won't be around in a couple of years because of AI. Or what's a more realistic scenario is you need to understand AI to amplify your skill set. And so the actual jobs won't necessarily be replaced by AI, in my opinion. But if you don't know how to use AI, which you're not learning in school right now, you're going to be behind. They're looking for people who know how to use AI. So when you put all of those things together, it can absolutely work against anybody who's trying to get their first job or one of their first jobs out of college. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
You know, I have so many thoughts about all the things that you just said. AI, I use it every day. And I do hear people will even say to me, why work on, career development or do career advising or coaching, fill in the blank, whatever age, 15, 16, 19, 20, because jobs are changing so rapidly. There's all these emerging fields, jobs are going away. So why should we do it? And, I look back to myself, I'm like, okay, I have a podcast, I have an online course where we give live support and coaching as part of it. If I go back to when I was thinking about careers, I couldn't have even imagined this, but you've got to take that first step in confidence. And I look back and I go, like, there are through lines, and my listeners hear me say this all the time. There are through lines through everybody's journey. And those are going to help to inform that next step. And that step just has to adapt with what's going on in the workplace now. With AI, so you said, I think there's that mindset of AI is just going to replace me, so I shouldn't bother doing anything. But to your point, let's get AI savvy. And your experience has been with these college graduates that they're not really getting that in college?
That's, I don't think anybody is in a place yet where it's like you're going to go take this course and it's built into your major and things like that. I do think there are several online courses and free resources that people can go to, or just go to ChatGPT and start figuring out and learning and playing with it and seeing what you can do. So I think that goes right back to the secrets of the workplace that we were talking about. If you're curious about it and you're a self-learner, you have the ability to do that and go and learn those things, because all these tools, there is some sort of free version that you can use and free resources around you. So that's what I'm thinking is, even if it's not handed to you in some sort of formal manner, you can actually teach yourself a lot if you just keep that curiosity going.
Yeah, I haven't done anything with formal with AI. I have a community, people that I network with or in my world that will share good prompts that have worked with us. So there's another plug for making intentional connections and staying connected to people, which would be a soft skill, like
Yes.
you were just talking about. But like we're talking here, and I'm going to give this conversation to ChatGPT, and it will help not do all the work, but it will help script the intro, the outro. It will help me come up with a good title that would resonate with the content. It's my co-thinker, but it's
Hmm.
not replaced anything, right? I always change it. It's never good enough. And then of course I have to record it anyway. So I like that idea of just like digging in and do it yourself. I can speak to the fact that I have figured it out myself, and I'm 56. So if I can figure it out, any of the people that you and I are working with can figure it out for sure.
Yeah, and I love, the word that I use with AI is it just amplifies what you're doing, but it can't
Hmm.
replace it, because you have to put in your mindset, your strategy, your whatever it may be to actually make it work for what you're doing. But if you can go in there and play with it and go into a job interview and say, look what I made using AI, it's going to blow them away, because they're going to be like, wow, they learn things, they're curious, they know how to actually see a challenge and then go after that solution. And who doesn't want to hire somebody like that?
Well, in my Launch Career Clarity course where we're doing the career development and advising, one of the things that we talk about is curating real world experiences. Is what all of Module 4 is
Mhm.
about. I suggest that students look at like Coursera, which has a ton of free courses, and there are courses in there on AI, being a prompt engineer. I know Vanderbilt previously has had one that is prompt engineering course, things like that, which to your point, it only shows that you're a go-getter and
Mhm.
that you're going to figure things out. And that's something that you could add to your resume.
100%. Before AI was really a thing, I used Coursera to take classes on like negotiation because I was scared about going into a sales role. I mean, whatever it is, there's a resource to go help you, and the only thing that's going to do is make you more desirable in the job market.
So I have a question for you. So we give everybody in our course the Berkman Personality Assessment. But I also have a small number of small businesses that I will help them. I might be their executive coach for the owner, or I am going to, go ahead. Hold on one sec. I got to pick it. Somebody just sent me something that I
Uh-oh.
thought I had everything shut down and it popped up. I'm like, what? I have to regroup.
Sure.
Now I got to get my thoughts together. I have a small number of businesses that I support with hiring. I'm like the executive coach to the business owner, right? So we just do this. I only do this in a very limited capacity, but the Berkman is part of the tool that we use for this, right? And I look at the wiring of the individual, but I also look at their resume. And I have a question for you because I think you're doing hiring in a broader scope in your day job than what I'm doing, right? But I understand personality and how that aligns with workplace satisfaction and jobs and team fit. But when I see a resume and I'm part of this, I feel horrible. I've got a silent workplace penalty. I feel convicted, Brianne. So help me think through this. When I see job hopping, if I see somebody's there only a year, I do penalize the person. And now I'm really wondering if is that good? Is that bad? Is that right? Is that wrong? Where do you see this headed? I mean, is your advice to Gen Z stop the job hopping? Don't be so quick to leave? Or is your message to millennials and Gen X over here, you've got to quit doing these workplace penalties?
I think in your 20s, you have to explore, right? You have to get out there, and it's not previous generations where they're going to stay at one place that you got into after college until they retire. So I would definitely say go out there and explore. For me, I thought I got what I thought was my dream job. I was working at a magazine in New York City. That's what I wanted to do my whole entire childhood. However, after a few years, that's not what I wanted to do anymore. It lost its glamour. I was literally getting paid peanuts on my desk Fridays, for living in New York. And so I changed my career entirely. I moved into marketing and then from there into operations. And so to feel like you're trapped somewhere, that's obviously not what we want,
Yeah,
nor
that's
what
not
we
good.
would not what we would recommend, right? So if you need to change companies because it's not it doesn't align with your values, or you need to change companies because you need a new role in your life, that is okay. I wouldn't necessarily say, proactively look for a job every single year if you're happy in your role. I don't think that's necessary. You can take the proper steps to get pay increases at your current company if that's the issue. But, if you're happy with the values and what you're doing, stay there and try and make that work. From the other side, for us who are now hiring, if that's the only drawback, obviously I tried to overlook that and at least have that first conversation with somebody and let them tell me why they kind of went from job to job in those areas or a couple times. One of our best hires, we saw that on her resume and she said, this first job, it just wasn't the best. And then maybe my third job, I ended up at a startup and they weren't paying us because they didn't have it. So obviously, in that case, I had to move on. So the best people aren't just job hopping for fun. There's usually a reason behind that. So if we are looking at a resume and we see the job hopping, but everything else looks great, I would encourage that first chat just to see what's going on.
I have a question for you on your own career journey. And I love asking these types of questions for people that are older and have some work experience because I think that the generation after us can learn so many lessons if they're willing to pause and listen. So, you had always dreamt of going into publishing in the magazine world. And you got there, and well, and we should tell everybody you no longer live in New York City. So
Nope,
you also not only
I'm in
did you
Ohio.
change jobs, you're in a different part. You're 4 hours away from me, but we're both in Ohio.
Yep.
So not only did you change jobs, what you did, you changed where you were working. You moved.
Right.
So that's another caveat to this because yeah, it's expensive to live in New York. Do you feel like looking back that you had a misunderstanding of what it might be to work in magazine publishing? Or do you feel like you understood it, but then like the money was more of an issue. I mean, it's really hard. The financial literacy piece of 15 to 25-year-olds I have kids this age. It's really tough to know the real cost of like what is even $100. How far does it really go? And these days it doesn't go nearly as far. But like, did you really understand what you were getting into?
No, of course not. You never really know, and I can actually tell you exactly how little I knew. When I moved to New York, my grandparents, since I was a baby, had been giving me those savings bonds, and so I had like $2,500 saved up from these savings bonds. So I'm moving, I've got my summer internship, and I'm thinking this is going to get me through the summer. That got me through like a week and a half.
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah, it's like a week and a half. So that was a really big awakening. As far as like the publishing, I knew I wasn't going to make big bucks. I went into journalism. That was my degree. I knew I wasn't going to make big bucks. But for me, my life leading up to that, I was a professional dancer and a writer since, I was making literally like newspapers in my kids, my childhood bedroom for my family. And so like it was very big passion of mine. I tunnel vision, that's what I was gonna do.
Yeah.
So that part of it was fine. I think to answer your question appropriately, I think what actually happened is my priorities changed. I
Mm.
wanted to, in the beginning, go to New York, be in publishing no matter what it took. And I'm super glad I did it. I would have always regretted it. However, my priorities shifted a couple years later where I'm like, I make no money. I'm far away from my family. I don't see them. Eventually, I want to have kids. I want them to be close to their grandparents. And, someday I'd like to retire. So I knew what I was getting into to some degree. Everything was 1,000 times more expensive than I thought. But, at the end of the day, I think it was my priorities that changed.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about the follow your passion advice?
I think try it when you're in your 20s. And I have young kids now. And so I think to myself, like if my son says I want to be an artist, or he actually is very good on the piano, I'm going to be a pianist, how do I handle that? And it's like I want to be in a place in my life where I can fully support that, help him if he needs it, go for it, do your thing. But we're not quite there yet. He's 8, so I have 10 more years,
You gotta,
or
yeah.
more. But I did it, and so I feel like the right thing to say is go try it, but maybe understand what it takes to make sure you're okay on, coming out of that too.
Right. I It's one of my least favorite pieces of advice, but
Mhm.
from a satisfaction perspective, I try to look at like, can you get passions met, fulfilled in areas that, I mean, sometimes it's a perfect match, right? It can get met in the career. And then in others, there's there are ways that you can meet those passions in your free time,
Mhm.
perhaps, right?
Mhm.
But I've
Agreed.
also seen as students really dig in and gain new skills, that proficiency can fuel passion.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And for me, I'm such an avid learner. Like I love learning. And so I read about 50 books a year. I listen to podcasts all the time. I actually went and got my certification to be a sommelier just to learn about wine.
Oh, cool.
I'm not going to use it for anything, but you're right. I think that actually ended up fueling that sort of investigative side of me that I had from journalism. So, I don't necessarily use it now, but I think I get it through my hobbies.
Yeah. When I want to go back to the cost of the savings bonds
Mm,
story is fantastic because everybody of a certain age had grandparents that gave them savings bonds, right?
yeah, I hope so.
My kids are 23 and 27, and I was just going through something and I came across it was like our firebox, right? And I think I had to get a passport out or something. And I came across a savings bond that is for one of my kids. And I'm like, oh, it's not mature yet. I'm not giving it to them yet. So that it has the greatest amount of value. But that's a fantastic story that most people can relate to that you're like, and it was a week and a half. It was 10 days later and I was out of money. When
Yeah.
you're advising 20 somethings on evaluating pay against cost of living, I find this is one of the hardest concepts to teach. Do you have tips for, and if you have some secret sauce, I want to hear it because this is a hard one. knowing the value of a dollar, what it costs to live, geographical constraints on that. How do you solve for that when you're advising these young women?
You're right. That is extremely difficult. And for women now, I think it's a little bit more out in the open of this advice of you don't have to necessarily just take what they're offering you, or you have
Mm,
the right script, you have the resources to say, well, my skill set actually should be in this range, or I'm looking at other jobs in this range that helps them talk to the person that's interviewing them about salary in a more confident way, so
mm.
that they're not starting behind, where their other colleagues maybe, or where they need to be to have a life. And so I think it's super important to really do your research ahead of time and to practice that script. So understand what kind of your minimum is, do your research. This is the minimum I need. And then what you do is you give a range, and that bottom number should be your minimum that you need. So if you need, we'll just throw out numbers. If you need 50K wherever you are, then, I'm looking for, and that would probably be more like in a bigger city,
Yeah.
for that, age group. But if you could start out by saying, I'm interviewing for other jobs in the 50 to 60K range, so that if you land at 50, you're okay. But if you say, well, I'm looking for 45 to 50, they're not going to give you that 50. They're going to come in at 45 or 42. So that is, research. Make sure you know what you should ask for and practice asking for that. Because if you go in and the first time you're saying those phrases during the interview, you're going to flop. You're going to say things wrong. So practice saying it to your dog, to your cat, to your mom, whomever, because that's going to set you up literally for the rest of your life in that salary.
You know, that takes confidence to do.
It,
And
yeah.
my goal is that we're always launching confident young adults, right? And I think what it really makes me think about, and I have kids that have just launched, right? And so I even think about my own children. I think about the thousands that we've worked with. They can be so afraid to even send a LinkedIn connection, right? We give a LinkedIn guide to students just to put together your profile and go make 5 connections, right? I find if you're afraid to do that, like you're not going to be able to ask that question. So for those of us, like if it's a student that's younger that's listening, if it's a parent that has a teen or a college student, or if it's somebody that's working with them, like helping them be brave. Because I always tell kids, like, what looks like confidence on the outside, it just takes courage on the inside, and it gets easier the second time you do it. But to your point, that the first time you ask about that, absolutely cannot be when you're sitting there doing it.
Yeah, you're so right. It does take confidence, and even reaching out on LinkedIn. I totally get that. Putting yourself out there is one of the scariest things in life ever. So I completely get that. And I've seen that in my own self. Like, I don't necessarily want to put out this Instagram, reel that's
Yeah.
talking about what I'm trying to accomplish. But what I will say is that action is what builds confidence. And I think you said that as well. It's the first time is super scary, and the second time's a little bit less scary. So the worst thing you can do is sit there and wait for the quote unquote right time. What you need to do is just get over that hump the first time, get out there and do it. And that confidence comes from repeated action.
Yeah, I think the action piece. I was earlier this year, I read The 20 something Treatment by Dr. Meg Jay. I don't know if you've read that
No,
book.
not read that one.
She is a great Instagram follow, especially because you guys, she's a psychologist, so you guys do very different work, but with the same population. And she preaches like action. You
Mm.
have to move, you have to do something. And so this has been like really an inspiring and helpful conversation. If you had any parting words of advice, and if it were a teen or 20 something listening, what would your parting words of advice be?
Start working on your emotional intelligence. And that means being self aware and being able to self regulate yourself. And it also means building that social intelligence and that communication and empathy skill. If you can do those things, it's going to bolster your hard skills in a way that's going to propel you for your entire career.
Fantastic. Thank you. If people want to follow along with all of the fantastic advice that you're putting out into the world, where's the best place to do that or how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, Lisa, thank you so much for having me on. The best place for daily updates is probably to follow me on Instagram. It's Brianne Independence Lab, so Brianne Independence Lab.
We'll
But
put it, we will put it on the show notes too.
I figured, and you know what? I do have a link as a gift if that's okay. Because
Absolutely.
a lot of this stuff is just so hard, it's a little bit abstract. So if you want to learn more about this, or you know you have a loved one that should learn more about this, I put together like a very easy ebook that kind of goes over this, and usually it sells for 19, but because this audience is so awesome and you take such good care of them, Lisa, I want to just give it away for free. So that URL would be theindependencelab.com/playbook. That's where that's at.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brianne. I appreciate you making the time.
Thank you for having me.